This is just going to be a very quick video discussing the complete bag of wang, the Tomorrow War, which I saw last night, and honestly I'm just baffled by. I'm not going to sit here and point out every single plot hole and failure of the film because we'd be here till way past my bedtime and my uncle is as lonely as he is a strict timekeeper. On paper this film should be everything I love, given that my only real requirement for enjoying a film is that it has aliens in it. However, I think a lot of sci-fi fans are going to be put off by this film very quickly. It seems to not just wear its influences on its sleeve so much as it's purposefully trying to rip off every great science fiction movie it can think of. I guess the small positive here is that Amazon are funding original sci-fi, although as I'll point out, I don't think this is particularly original, unless you count stealing the first act of two sci-fi classics and jamming them together into what you're going to call a conclusion as original. Oh, I enjoyed J.K. Simmons. J.K. Simmons is a treasure. So with all of those good points out of the way, let's get right down to the ethically butchered by Chris Pratt meat and potatoes of this thing, and let me start by saying that I cannot physically fathom the quality, or perhaps lack of quality, found in the meth being smoked by the studio executives over at Amazon, necessary for them to have signed off on this train wreck between outright plagiarism and total mundanity. Let's start with the plagiarism because they sure did. This is not something you realize halfway in. This is a cold open right into ripping off Edge of Tomorrow as we get insert household name main star falling dramatically through the air towards a pitched battlefield of near future humans versus aliens with a time travel twist. Even down to the drop having gone wrong and the intro credits filled with news reports describing the ongoing war with the aliens. It all feels extremely reminiscent of a far better movie. Even the title isn't trying to hide its, let's say, influences, to be extremely generous. You could literally bundle together a sequel called The Edge of Tomorrow War 2 if it wasn't for the fact that one of these movies shits on the other one from an aggressive height and should rightfully be wanting to distance itself as much as possible from the target of said vertical excretion once sufficiently evacuated. There's plenty of other similarities between the Tomorrow Wank and Emily Blunt's masterclass in yoga push-ups. It's not just rewinding time to save the day against the aliens, or the ongoing land war with aliens throughout Europe spilling into the rest of the world. We've even got the badass female future commander the time-traveling main character is trying to establish a closer relationship with, and her single blonde braid. Hell, even just simple visual stuff like the fights with agile alien monsters in dilapidated industrial corridors. All of it is too reminiscent of Edge of Tomorrow while being far, far less interesting in its attempt. And this isn't just a case of little Timmy copying the kid next to him. Timmy has in fact gone around the entire classroom, drooling over the work of far more talented children whilst ripping up pieces of it to absorb into his own PVA-crusted nightmare. While World War Z doesn't have an eternal claim to things being swarmed by other things, I can't help but feel like this last bastion of humanity having its walls swarmed by the monstrous entity now devouring humanity is familiar enough that someone at Amazon must have pointed it out. And one can only assume that the reply was, "It's fine, more meth, cancel the Expanse again while we fight over this last brain cell." Now if the film finished where it logically should, that is to say 2/3 of the way through when future human society falls and Chris Pratt returns with the vaccine that could prevent the bad future where everyone gets eaten and this movie is forced to exist, this plagiarism may not have been worth thinking about. But right about the time I realised they were going to go find the slowly thawing alien craft at the polar ice cap, I started to get an extreme pressure in the side of my head and an erection that could only be sated with the bodily orifices of those responsible for this war crime of a movie. Yes, they top it off by ripping off not only The Thing, but also Alien, because if you're ripping off one of the best sci-fi horror films of all time, why not rip off the other one too? They even make a joke about it, the only part of which I can remember being specifically why it annoyed me, which was essentially the writers pointing out that it's like The Thing but different because it's on the opposing ice cap. Those They do this when they time drop into Miami too, casually referencing Will Smith without his permission, as if a nod towards his extensive and well-rounded back catalogue will excuse them if they decide to rip off Independence Day at any point. So we have the team of intrepid soldier scientists heading off into the Arctic who stumble upon an alien craft that's been frozen there for millennia and upon doing so unleash a monstrous threat. Am I talking about The Thing or the Tomorrow Wank 2 plagiarism boogaloo? It doesn't matter, because as far as these writers are concerned, they can just be the same thing. And upon entering the craft, we switch fluidly from a shit version of The Thing to a shit version of Alien. Out of nowhere, the set design seems to want to switch to Geiger-esque biomachina, all vaginal doorways, fixed symmetry, and fleshy pods. All the weirdness one visually equates to the alien ship in Alien and the Republican Party's underground sextropolis. Like they earned that. Like they did anything other than copy it because it looked cool and reminds people of a much better film than the one they're watching. While information is limited, the subtext is blindingly clear. Even the motivation, creation, design of the aliens is the same as the movie Alien. We see different looking pilots to the aliens we've seen in the film so far, and escape test subjects or bioweapons they had aboard the ship that were the aliens we've been encountering the whole way through. The savage product of some greater intelligence. They literally just do the same idea with the same visuals. Same with The Thing. UFO frozen in ice that after millennia thaws and releases a monstrous alien that flees across the ice. It's not an homage if you just do the exact same thing and try to pass it off as your own. Just like wearing someone else's skin and trying to cash their social security isn't doing a funny impression of them. Not only are you going to smell terrible, but other than the obvious lust for cash, everyone is just going to ask why you'd ever do that. Even the trying to develop a more meaningful paternal relationship through time was recently and far better achieved in Interstellar and Ad Astra. I mean it when I say this movie is a soulless patchwork of other people's ideas, applied with all the skill of EA's PR department. There are plenty of things about The Completely Borrowed War that I can forgive. It's a B movie after all, and so it doesn't matter that Chris Pratt and his wife figure out the origin of the alien threat in 5 minutes in their living room when future humanity who've mastered fucking time travel can't do it with decades of research. Nor does it matter that all of the vaccine plotline and future war is essentially useless given their decision to just blow up the aliens. It doesn't even matter that they decide to go face this threat alone because they are retired soldier scientists, potentially releasing the world-ending threat decades earlier rather than just alerting the actual armed forces. I'll forgive all of that because it doesn't matter, but I will not tolerate this dribbling, artistically bankrupt mess of a film stepping on classics and calling it an homage. It's not homage, it's badly plagiarized ideas lazily dragged from far better properties and stitched back together like limbs after the Somme. Now that I have my shotgun barrel firmly spreading the teeth of this culturally insignificant foray into a beloved genre, I feel like it's time to pull the trigger, because it's quite impossible to finish this without mentioning how weird and out of place all the vaccine stuff was. There's clearly a running theme that we need to look after tomorrow. This is the main gambit, that people need to sacrifice today for the safety and security of our future selves. In the film, this is played out quite literally with time travel. It's perhaps the sole unique idea the film has, and it's actually okay. That's a good message for right now, in a time where people are sacrificing personal freedoms and welfare to prevent the spread of a virus that threatens to loom into our future. But not only do we quickly find out that this is entirely fucking pointless and people are dying in droves against an unbeatable threat, we also find that subtext is bulldozed through in favor of the Vaccine Appreciation Hour. Chris Pratt's daughter's childhood interest is vaccines. Not just science or medicine, she seems specifically interested in vaccines. It's even set up that her character is looking for vaccines while she's still a child, and lo and behold, as luck would have it, in the future her way of defeating those aliens comes in the form of a vaccine, and she now has a PhD in immunology. Now, strictly speaking, what she comes up with is a toxin, but the subtext is pretty damn clear, and we move from being obsessed with vaccines to focusing intently on the production of a compound that will save humanity and rid it from the monstrous alien organism now plaguing it. So from here on out, they'll be saying toxin a lot, but I think it's very clear what we're doing here. We even have a musical screen-in-screen montage of her producing this compound, as if the film just couldn't wait for all the laurels and tweets and blogs of congratulation for showing how the real heroes do science. It's almost as if the whole vaccine thing is being thrown in here specifically to pander to current trends and ensure there's going to be a misinformation warning on this video. And it's almost as if its presence in this movie is entirely unnecessary given that essentially all of the aliens get blown up or shot anyway. I mean, at one point we see an enormous hangar of alien pods, clearly far more than they had the vaccine for, and all of them just end up dying in the same inconceivably large explosion. The second explosion in the same sequence that just happens out of nowhere and no one could possibly have laid out in the time given by the edits. Despite the plot trying its best to make a big deal out of the tox vaccine, it's entirely undercut by the third act wanting desperately to be a different movie that it's impossible to ignore how meaningless it is to the conclusion. The film even gets lost half an hour before the end and tries to do a global warming thing with the UFO and aliens only being set loose by thawing ice caps. And look, vaccines are a good thing, but inserting what is essentially propaganda into the middle of your blockbuster feels a little ways past weird to me. Just like all the bafflingly obvious allusions to much better movies, it seems so glaring it must be purposeful. Almost as if those same meth-addled executives at Amazon were getting a lot of money to shill together some vaguely reminiscent sci-fi action around a B-plot consisting of vaccines are good. But that is, of course, conspiratorial of me, and so instead I will eschew the tinfoil hat and revert to my previous point that this film has nothing to offer beyond reflections of much better movies in the silvery curd atop its plagiarist wank.